Most women scream when their marriage ends. They throw vases, they burn photographs, they beg for answers. But Ilara Vance didn't make a sound. She didn't cry when she found the texts on Nathaniel's phone. She didn't tremble when she packed her life into 2 suitcases. She simply checked her watch. Because what her husband didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Ilara wasn't leaving because she was heartbroken. She was leaving because she had finally been activated. The black SUV waiting 2 streets over wasn't an Uber. It was her extraction. And the man waiting for her wasn't a rebound, he was the most dangerous billionaire in the Mediterranean. The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the rain battering the floor-to-ceiling windows of the London apartment. It was a cold, sterile space, chrome and glass, designed to impress Nathaniel's finance colleagues rather than to be lived in. Ilara folded a silk blouse with military precision. Left over right, tuck, smooth. She placed it into the Rimowa suitcase. It was the only sound in the room, the soft rustle of fabric and the rhythmic drumming of rain against the glass. "You're being dramatic, Ilara," Nathaniel said. He was leaning against the doorframe, swirling a glass of scotch. He looked tired, but mostly he looked annoyed. "It was one night. A lapse in judgment. You're going to throw away 5 years over a mistake." Ilara didn't look up. She reached for her jewelry box. She bypassed the diamond tennis bracelet Nathaniel had bought her after his bonus came in last year, the apology bracelet for missing her birthday. Instead, she took a simple silver locket. It was the only thing she owned that predated him. "Where will you even go?" Nathaniel scoffed, his voice rising, cracking with the first hint of panic. He was used to controlling the narrative. He was a partner at Goldman. He managed risks for a living. He couldn't calculate this reaction. "You have no savings. The prenup locks you out of the accounts until the divorce is finalized. You'll be on the street in a week." Ilara finally looked at him. Her eyes were a startling shade of gray, and they were completely empty of the warmth he was used to. "The keys are on the counter, Nathan," she said. Her voice was steady, low, and terrifyingly calm. "Don't walk out that door," he threatened, pushing off the doorframe. "If you walk out, I'm cutting the cards. I'm canceling the phone plan. You will have nothing." Ilara zipped the suitcase. The sound was sharp, like a zipper on a body bag. She stood up, smoothed her trench coat, and walked past him. She didn't flinch when he grabbed her arm. She simply looked at his hand until he let go, unsettled by her lack of reaction. She walked to the elevator. The doors slid open. She stepped in. As the doors closed, she saw Nathaniel standing in the hallway, his mouth open, a man who had just realized he had been living with a stranger for 5 years. Scene shift. The moment Ilara stepped out of the lobby onto the wet pavement of Kensington High Street, the persona dropped. She didn't slump. She sharpened. She pulled a burner phone from the lining of her purse. She dialed a number she had memorized 3 years ago. It rang once. Status? A male voice, deep, distorted. "Asset is clear," Ilara said, walking briskly toward a black Mercedes S-Class idling 2 blocks away. "The husband is neutralized. No suspicion of the secondary objective." "Good. Your flight leaves from Biggin Hill in 40 minutes. Do you have the drive?" Ilara patted her coat pocket. Inside was a USB drive containing the encrypted ledger of Nathaniel's firm evidence of money laundering for the Russian cartel. That was the price of her ticket out. Nathaniel thought she was a scorned wife. In reality, she was an auditor for a shadow agency that specialized in corporate takedowns. But the agency wasn't her endgame. They were just the bridge. She opened the back door of the Mercedes. The interior smelled of rich leather and expensive cologne. Sitting in the back seat was not her handler. It was a man she hadn't seen since a charity gala in Vienna. He was older, perhaps 60, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Nathaniel's annual salary. "Ilara," the man said, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Or should I call you by your real name now?" "Ilara is fine, Mr. Thorne," she said, sliding in. The car immediately pulled away into traffic. "You have the drive?" Thorne asked. She handed it to him. He plugged it into a laptop, nodded, and then snapped the laptop shut. "Nathaniel was a small fish," Thorne said, looking out the window. "A test. You passed. You stayed undercover for 5 years. You endured a marriage to a narcissist without breaking character. That shows discipline." "I want what was promised Silas," Alara said, her voice hard. "And you shall have it," Silas Thorne replied. He pressed a button, and the partition between them and the driver slid up. "But the contract has changed. We don't just need you to disappear. We need you to go somewhere else, somewhere much more dangerous than a banker's penthouse." Alara stared at him. "Where?" Silas pulled a photograph from his jacket pocket. It showed a yacht. It was massive, a floating city of black steel and glass. It looked like a predator sitting on the water. "The Obsidian," Silas said. "Owner Damon Cross. Tech mogul. Arms dealer. Billionaire. He's currently docked in Monaco for the Grand Prix. He's looking for a new curator for his private art collection. His last one had an accident." "And you want me to apply?" "I want you to get the job," Silas corrected. "And then I want you to find what he's hiding in the vault beneath the waterline. Do this and your debt is cleared. You get the new identity, the passport, and the $5 million. You walk away free." Alara looked at the photo of the yacht. It was terrifying. It was magnificent. "When do I start?" You're already hired," Silas said, handing her a glass of champagne. "Welcome to the high life, darling." The helicopter ride from Nice airport to the helipad in Monaco took 7 minutes. Alara looked down at the coastline, the azure water glittering deceptively under the sun. From this height, everything looked perfect. But Alara knew that down there, among the supercars and the casinos, was a shark tank. She was dressed differently now. Gone were the sensible clothes of a banker's wife. She wore a cream-colored linen suit, oversized sunglasses, and a scarf that cost $800. She looked like old money. She looked like she belonged. A tender was waiting for her at Port Hercules. It wasn't a standard boat. It was a sleek silver bullet of a vessel branded with a stylized O. The crew member who helped her aboard was young, tanned, and wore a headset. "Ms. Vance, Mr. Cross is expecting you." As they cut through the waves, the Obsidian came into view. Photographs didn't do it justice. It was 300 feet of midnight blue hull and tiered decks. It had 2 helipads, a swimming pool that looked large enough to host Olympic laps, and radar domes that suggested it had better surveillance tech than a small nation. This wasn't a boat. It was a sovereign state. They docked at the Stern Beach Club. Alara stepped onto the teak decking, her heels clicking rhythmically. Standing there to greet her was not Damon Cross, but a woman who looked like she had been carved out of marble. She was tall, severe, with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She held a tablet. "Ms. Vance," the woman said, her accent German clipped and precise. "I am Greta, the chief of staff. Shoes off, please. We do not wear street shoes on the teak." Alara complied, slipping off her heels. "A pleasure, Greta. Mr. Cross values punctuality. You are 3 minutes early." "This is acceptable," Greta said, not looking up from her tablet. "Follow me. Do not speak to the crew unless necessary. Do not enter the bridge, the engine room, or the master suite unless invited. Do not take photographs. If you are found with a recording device, you will be removed from the vessel immediately. And we are currently 12 miles offshore, so the swim back is discouraging." Greta turned and marched toward a glass elevator. Alara followed. The interior of the Obsidian was breathtaking. It was designed by Winch Design, clearly minimalist, textured, expensive. Rare marble floors, walls paneled in silk and art. Everywhere there was art. A Picasso sketch in the hallway. A Basquiat in the elevator lobby. It was a floating museum. "Mr. Cross is in the Sky Lounge," Greta said as the elevator rose to the top deck. "He does not like small talk. Be concise." The doors opened. The Sky Lounge was an expanse of glass offering a 360-degree view of the Mediterranean. In the center of the room sat a black velvet sofa. Sitting there reading a physical newspaper, a rarity these days, was Damon Cross. He stood up as Alara entered. He was younger than she expected, maybe 38. He had the kind of face that magazine covers loved, sharp-jawed, dark stubble eyes the color of the ocean during a storm. He wore a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing a tattoo on his forearm that was partially covered by a platinum Patek Philippe watch. "Alara Vance," he said. His voice was smooth like whiskey over ice, but there was a metallic edge to it. He didn't offer his hand. "The woman who discovered the forgery in the Met's Renaissance exhibit 3 years ago." Alara paused. That detail wasn't in her public resume. It was a classified incident. Silas had done his homework on her cover story, or Cross had dug deeper than he should have. "It was a clumsy forgery, Mr. Cross," Alara replied smoothly, maintaining eye contact. The brush strokes were too hesitant for a Titian. Damon smiled. It was a dangerous smile. "I like people who see the details. Most people are blinded by the frame." He walked over to a covered easel in the corner of the room. "I didn't hire you just to catalog my collection, Alara. Anyone can use a database. I hired you because I have a problem." He pulled the sheet off the easel. Alara's breath hitched in her throat. She forced herself to remain impassive, but her heart hammered against her ribs. It was a painting of a woman looking into a mirror, but the reflection showed a skeleton. "The Vanitas of Seville," Alara whispered. This was stolen from the Gardner Museum in 1990. It's been missing for 30 years. "Technically, it was lost," Damon corrected. "I recently acquired it. But there is a rumor in the underworld that I purchased a fake. I paid $40 million for this, Alara. I need you to tell me if I was robbed." Alara stepped closer to the painting. If this was the real Vanitas, Damon Cross wasn't just an arms dealer. He was sitting at the top of the black market food chain. And if she told him it was fake, the person who sold it to him would likely die. If she told him it was real, she was complicit in a federal crime. She looked at the paint cracking. She looked at the canvas weave. She turned to Damon. He was watching her, analyzing her micro-expressions. This was the test. "I need a loupe and a UV light," Alara said. "On the table." Damon gestured. She worked in silence for 10 minutes. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, she stood up. "Well," Damon asked. "It's a masterwork," Alara said. "The pigment layering is consistent with the 17th century. The craquelure is natural, not forced by heat." Damon relaxed his shoulders, dropping slightly. "Good. However," Alara added. Damon froze. "However." "It's not the Vanitas of Seville," she said. Damon's eyes narrowed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Explain." "It's a contemporary copy. A brilliant one. Likely painted by the ghost of Budapest within the last 5 years. But he made one mistake." Alara pointed to the corner of the mirror in the painting. "He used titanium white for the highlight. Titanium white wasn't invented until 1921. Silence stretched out. A muscle in Damon's jaw ticked. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "I'd stake my life on it," Alara said. Damon stared at the painting for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He walked over to a console table, picked up a phone, and dialed a number. "It's a fake," he said into the phone. "Deal with him." He hung up. He turned back to Alara, his eyes gleaming with a mix of fury and admiration. "You just saved me a great deal of embarrassment, Miss Vance. And you cost a man his life. How does that feel?" Alara didn't blink. "It feels like I just earned my salary." Damon studied her. For the first time he looked at her not as an employee, but as a puzzle. "Welcome aboard the Obsidian," he said. "Greta will show you to your cabin. Dinner is at 8. Dress formal. We have guests coming aboard from the mainland. And Alara." "Yes, Mr. Cross." Don't lie to me. Ever." Alara nodded and turned to leave. As she walked toward the elevator, her hands were trembling. She clenched them into fists. She had passed the first test, but she had just realized the magnitude of the danger she was in. Damon Cross wasn't just powerful. He was a killer, and she was trapped in the middle of the Mediterranean with him. As the elevator doors closed, she saw Damon pick up a knife and slash the $40 million canvas down the middle. Alara's cabin was larger than her entire apartment in London had been. It was situated on the main deck with a private balcony overlooking the sea. But Alara didn't spend time admiring the thread count of the Egyptian cotton sheets. As soon as the door clicked shut, she scanned the room. She checked the smoke detector, the vents, the underside of the desk. She found 2 bugs. One audio recorder behind the headboard and a pinhole camera in the digital clock. She didn't disable them. That would signal she was a pro. Instead, she took a towel into the bathroom, turned the shower on high to create white noise, and sat on the floor with her burner phone. She typed a single message to Silas Target, confirmed. "He's unstable, violent, the vault is likely on C deck, need schematics." She waited. No reply. She cleaned herself up. The wardrobe in the room was already stocked with clothes in her size, Silas's doing or Damon's. It was unsettling. She chose an emerald green silk gown that hugged her frame like a second skin. It was modest in the front, but dipped dangerously low in the back. At 7:55 p.m. she headed to the dining room on the upper deck. The sun was setting, casting a blood-red glow over the water. The dining table was set for 6. Damon was there wearing a tuxedo. He looked devastatingly handsome, which made him all the more terrifying. "You clean up well, Alara," he said, handing her a glass of vintage Cristal. "Thank you," she replied. "Our guests are arriving," he said, gesturing to the aft deck. A helicopter was landing. The rotors whipped the wind around them. 2 men stepped out. One was a heavy-set man with a Russian accent, Vladimir Volkov, an energy tycoon. The other was a younger man, American, with a face that looked surgically enhanced to perfection. "Alara, meet my associates," Damon said. "Vladimir and Julian." Alara's blood ran cold. She knew Julian, not personally, but she knew his face from the dossiers Silas had shown her. Julian Sterling, a fixer for the CIA. If Julian recognized her, or if he ran facial recognition on her, her cover as a simple art curator would be blown in seconds. Julian stepped forward, extending a hand. He had a predator's grin. "A pleasure. I didn't know Damon had such lovely taste in staff." Alara took his hand. It was cold. "I'm the curator, Mr. Sterling." "Curator?" Julian repeated, his eyes scanning her face, lingering on her eyes. "I feel like we've met before. London, New York." "I doubt it," Alara said, forcing a smile. "I keep a low profile, mostly in archives and basements." "Is that so?" Julian challenged. "You have the posture of a dancer or a soldier." Damon watched the exchange closely, swirling his wine. "Julian is suspicious of everyone, Alara. Don't take it personally. He thinks the waiter is trying to poison him." "In my line of work, the waiter usually is." Julian laughed, but his eyes didn't leave Alara. Dinner was a minefield. They ate lobster thermidor and truffle risotto, discussing global politics, oil prices, and art. Alara had to play the role of the intellectual, offering insights on the art market while dodging Julian's probing questions about her background. "So, Alara," Julian said, slicing into his steak, "where did you study the Sorbonne, Yale?" "Florence." She lied effortlessly. "The Institute of Art and Restoration." "Ah, I have a friend who teaches there, Professor Moretti. Do you know him?" It was a trap. There was no Professor Moretti. "I believe you mean Professor Morelli," Alara corrected gently. "Old man smells of turpentine. Yes, I took his seminar on frescoes." Julian paused. He smiled, but it was tight. "Right. Morelli. My mistake." He knew she was good. The game was on. After dinner, the men retired to the cigar lounge. Alara was dismissed. She walked out onto the deck, her heart racing. She needed fresh air. She needed to think. Julian Sterling was going to expose her. She had maybe 24 hours before he made a call and found out Alara Vance didn't exist until 3 years ago. She leaned against the railing, looking down at the dark water, thinking of jumping. She spun around. It was Damon. He had come out quietly, abandoning his guests. He wasn't smoking a cigar. "Just admiring the view," she said. Damon moved closer. He invaded her personal space, pinning her against the railing. He smelled of smoke and sandalwood. "Julian doesn't like you," Damon murmured. "He thinks you're a plant." "I'm not," Alara said, holding his gaze. "I know," Damon said. "Because if you were a plant, you wouldn't be wearing a locket that costs $15. He reached out and touched the cheap silver locket at her throat, the one from her childhood. Spies usually have better props. He ran his thumb over her collarbone. His touch was electric but terrifying. "I have a job for you, Alara. Tonight." "The art is cataloged for the day," she said. "Not art," Damon whispered. "I need you to steal something for me." Alara stared at him. "Excuse me?" "Vladimir Volkov," Damon said, tilting his head toward the lounge where the Russian was laughing. "He's wearing a ring, a heavy gold signet ring. Inside the band are the coordinates to a lithium mine in Siberia that he promised to sell to me but is secretly selling to the Chinese tomorrow." "You want me to steal a ring off a man's finger?" "I want you to seduce him. Get the ring, take a picture of the inscription, and put it back. Before breakfast." "I'm a curator, Damon, not a thief." Damon leaned in his lips, brushing her ear. "You spotted a fake painting in 10 minutes that fooled experts for years. You noticed Julian was testing you before he even finished his sentence. You're not just a curator, Alara. Stop pretending." He pulled back, his eyes dark. "Do this, and I'll pay you double your contract. Fail or refuse. And Julian might just be right about you. And we know what happens to people who lie to me." He turned and walked back inside, leaving Alara alone in the dark. She looked at the moon. The mission had gone off the rails. She was supposed to be investigating Damon, not working as his corporate spy. But she had no choice. She touched her locket. Inside wasn't a picture of her mother. It was a tiny compressed cyanide pill. A last resort. "Okay," she whispered to the wind. "Let's go to work." Alara knew how men like Vladimir Volkov operated. They were creatures of habit, of indulgence, and of ego. Damon Cross's demand was a gamble, but it was a calculated one. She smoothed the silk of her gown, took a deep breath, and re-entered the cigar lounge. The air was thick with the scent of cohibas and aged brandy. Volkov was holding court, telling a boisterous story about a tiger hunt in Siberia. Julian Sterling listening with an amused, cynical expression. Damon sat apart, observing a silent predator. Alara walked directly to the bar. "May I have a glass of water, please?" she asked the bartender. Her voice was calm, almost demure. Volkov stopped mid-sentence, his eyes small and beady, fixed on her. "Ah, the beautiful curator returns. Are you not entertained by our masculine pursuits, Ms. Vance?" Alara turned, offering a faint, hesitant smile. "I confess, Mr. Volkov, my knowledge of hunting is limited to recognizing the artistic merit in a Rubens depiction of one, but I am fascinated by your stories." She made sure her eyes met his, directly, a subtle challenge behind the feigned admiration. Julian Sterling watched, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "Then you must sit with us, my dear," Volkov boomed, patting the leather seat beside him. The signet ring on his finger glinted under the dim lights, heavy, ornate, a family crest etched into the gold. Alara gracefully accepted. She allowed Volkov to pour her a small digestive, feigning ignorance of its potency. Her objective was not to intoxicate him, but to lull him into a sense of security. "So, Ms. Vance," Volkov began, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone, "Damon says you are quite the expert on old things. Tell me, do you find modern art lacking?" This was her opening. Alara launched into a captivating, eloquent dissertation on the evolution of artistic expression, weaving in anecdotes about forgotten masters, and the hidden symbolism in seemingly mundane works. She spoke of the subtle power of objects, how a simple ring could hold centuries of history and meaning. Volkov, a man used to people deferring to his wealth, found himself genuinely captivated by her intellect and understated charm. She leaned in slightly, allowing the low cut of her gown to offer a glimpse enough to hold his gaze, but not so much as to appear overtly provocative. "And sometimes," she murmured, "the most precious secrets are not displayed in museums, but hidden in plain sight. A family crest, for instance, can carry more weight than any painting." Volkov chuckled, preening. "Ah, you understand this ring," he boasted, holding up his hand. "It is a symbol. My grandfather wore it when he founded our empire." "It's magnificent," Ilara said, her eyes wide with a carefully practiced awe. "May I? Just for a moment." She extended her hand, her fingers delicate and long. Volkov hesitated for a fraction of a second, his male pride battling his ingrained suspicion. But her gaze was so pure, so genuinely admiring. He slipped the heavy ring off his finger and placed it in her palm. Ilara's heart hammered. This was it. She held the ring, pretending to examine the crest. Her thumb brushed against the inside of the band. There barely visible were tiny, intricately engraved coordinates. "The craftsmanship is exquisite," she whispered, her voice husky. She had to act fast. She subtly adjusted her grip, pulling her burner phone from a hidden pocket in her dress already set to camera mode. With a practiced motion, she angled the phone, took a rapid, silent burst of photos of the inscription, her other hand shielding the phone from Volkov's peripheral vision as she held the ring. It was a move honed over years of documenting hidden documents. Click, click, click. 3 shots. Clear. "It truly is a legacy," she said, handing the ring back with a gentle smile. "Thank you for sharing such a treasure." Volkov beamed, satisfied. He slipped the ring back onto his finger. He had no idea what had just transpired. Ilara excused herself, pleading a slight headache from the cigar smoke. As she passed Damon, their eyes met. He gave her a fraction of a nod, almost imperceptible. She had done it. Back in her cabin, Ilara immediately uploaded the photos to Silas along with a brief message. "Volkov ring obtained. Coordinates sent. Need exit strategy. Julian Sterling is active." A reply came almost instantly. "Well done. Maintain cover. Exit being arranged. Awaiting further instruction." She deleted the photos from her phone, then deleted the messaging app itself. She then looked at the 2 bugs she had found earlier. She now knew they were there. She would use them. She took out a small encrypted thumb drive she had hidden in the heel of one of her shoes. This was not the drive she had given Silas. This was her insurance. She began compiling a digital dossier on Damon Cross. Every piece of art, every guest, every suspicious conversation, every detail she had observed. She even started a psychological profile detailing his unpredictable mood swings, his need for control, his casual cruelty. If Silas's plan went south, she would have her own leverage. And she had a sinking feeling it would go south. Julian Sterling was still on the yacht, and he was watching her. The next morning, the mood on the Obsidian was palpably different. Volkov was gone, having been discreetly tendered back to shore before dawn. Damon, however, was in a foul mood. Ilara found him on the aft deck speaking in hushed, angry tones into a satellite phone. His face was a thundercloud. He slammed the phone down when he saw her. That Russian snake. He tried to pull a fast one. He backed out of the lithium deal, Ilara ventured, feigning innocence. Damon gave her a chilling smile. He certainly tried, but thanks to your quick thinking, Ilara, I had the exact coordinates. My people moved in overnight. The mine is now my mine. Volkov lost 40 million and gained a significant problem with his Chinese buyers. He clapped his hands together, once a sharp, decisive sound. Well done. You have proven invaluable. Your bonus will be wired immediately. Ilara felt a cold dread. She had just facilitated a hostile takeover, potentially sparking an international incident. This was far beyond her original mission parameters. "I need access to the lower decks, Mr. Cross," she said, attempting to steer the conversation back to her original task. "For the art inventory. I noticed some valuable antique maps in the chart room that require specific environmental conditions." Damon's eyes narrowed. "The lower decks are restricted. Crew access only." "But some of your most valuable pieces are stored there, aren't they?" Alara pressed, remembering Silas's intel about the vault being below the waterline. "Climate-controlled storage for delicate works. I imagine you have a very impressive vault." Damon looked at her, a strange mix of admiration and suspicion in his gaze. "You're perceptive, Alara. Too perceptive. Greta will give you access to the general storage, but the vault is entirely off-limits. Until further notice." He walked away, leaving her with the distinct impression that her questions had landed too close to the truth. Later that afternoon, Alara was in the library cataloging rare first editions when Julian Sterling walked in. He leaned against the doorway, observing her with the intensity of a hawk. "You really are good, aren't you?" Julian said, his voice quiet. Alara didn't look up from the book. "At cataloging, yes. It's a precise science." "Not that," Julian scoffed. "At playing the ingenue. At charming information out of a Russian gangster. Damon thinks you're brilliant, a natural." Alara finally looked at him. "And you, Mr. Sterling?" "I think you're more than a curator," Julian said, walking slowly towards her. "I ran your name through every database known to man. Alara Vance is a ghost. No birth certificate, no university records from Florence, no family, nothing before 3 years ago." Her heart skipped a beat, but her face remained impassive. "Perhaps I prefer anonymity." "Anonymity is a luxury for the rich or a necessity for the covert," Julian countered. He pulled a chair closer and sat opposite her, leaning forward. "Which are you? Alara, or should I call you Project Nightingale?" Alara froze. Project Nightingale was the code name for Silas's elite unit of corporate infiltrators, a program so secret only a handful of people knew it existed. Julian Sterling wasn't just a CIA fixer. He was far deeper in the intelligence world than she had imagined. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice a little too tight. "Don't lie to me," Julian said, his voice suddenly sharp. "I'm not Damon. And unlike Damon, I don't kill the messenger. I recruit them. Who are you working for, Silas Thorne?" Alara didn't reply. There was no point. Julian nodded slowly. "I knew it. Thorne is a snake. He's been using you for his own agenda. He's trying to get at Damon, and you're his pawn." "What do you want?" Alara asked, her guard finally dropping. "I want Damon Cross," Julian said, his eyes hard. "He's a menace. Funds terrorist organizations, sells weapons to rogue states, manipulates markets. He's untouchable because he operates outside of any jurisdiction. But he's about to make a very big mistake." "What mistake?" "He's about to sell a highly sensitive piece of classified technology to a hostile government, a micro-EMP device capable of disabling an entire city's infrastructure without a trace. It's stored in his vault. That's what Thorne is really after, isn't it? Not just art or financial ledgers. He wants that device." Alara's mind reeled. An EMP device. Silas hadn't told her that. He had minimized the risk, turning it into a simple art theft. He had lied. "And you want me to help you get it?" she asked. "I want you to get it for us," Julian corrected. "The agency has been trying to get inside Cross's operation for years. Thorne just gave us the perfect opening. If you cooperate, if you get that device to me, you get full immunity, a new life and protection from Thorne, and from Cross. Your debt is wiped clean. You walk away." Alara looked at him, weighing her options. Silas had played her. He had sent her into a viper's nest, not for a simple ledger, but for something far more dangerous. Julian was offering a way out, but it meant betraying Silas. "How do I know I can trust you?" Alara asked. Julian pulled out a small encrypted satellite phone. "This device is untraceable. Call this number when you have the EMP. We'll extract you." He placed the phone on the table. "Don't tell me anything you don't want Cross to hear. I assume your cabin is wired. Mine is too." He stood up. "The ship is already under a soft lockdown for the sale. The vault will be guarded. This is your one chance, Alara. Choose wisely. Because if you don't help me when Cross finds out who you really are, you'll be sleeping with the fishes. And if Thorne finds out you're cooperating with me, he'll send his own people to silence you." Julian walked out, leaving Alara alone with the silent phone, the ticking clock, and the chilling realization that she was caught between two ruthless powers, both willing to use her as a disposable asset. She picked up the satellite phone. It was heavier than it looked. Her hand trembled slightly. The game had just changed. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. The stakes were impossibly high. She was no longer just a corporate spy. She was entangled in a geopolitical power struggle. The EMP device was a weapon of mass disruption, and both Silas and Julian wanted her to retrieve it. Her primary target was Cross's vault, located on sea deck 2 levels below the waterline. Getting there would be a challenge. She began to plan using every skill Silas had taught her. She knew Cross's security was meticulous but also predictable. It relied on technology and intimidation. She needed schematics. Her opportunity came the next morning. Greta informed her that Cross was hosting a high-stakes poker game in the observation lounge, and he required all staff to remain discreetly occupied. This meant less direct oversight. Alara made her way to the engineering room, a place she was forbidden from entering. She had observed the engineers' habits: a shift change at 3 a.m., a coffee break at 10 a.m., and a reliance on digital access logs. She waited for the 10 a.m. coffee break. The door was locked, but a forgotten ID badge was hanging on a peg outside the door. A junior engineer named Lars. Careless. She used a hair clip to pick the lock, a skill she'd learned in a safe house in Prague. Inside the engineering room was a tangle of wires, blinking lights, and monitors. One screen displayed the yacht's structural integrity, including detailed blueprints. She quickly snapped photos of the vault's location, its access points, and crucially, the ventilation shafts that led to it. She then used a small portable EMP she carried in her bag, a device designed to disable cameras and minor electronics, to momentarily scramble the digital access logs, erasing her entry. Scene shift. The next evening, the Obsidian was buzzing with a nervous energy. The high-stakes sale of the EMP device was imminent. Cross was in the main salon hosting his final, most exclusive clients. Alara, dressed in a simple black dress, moved through the shadows. She had created a diversion in the galley, a minor electrical fire easily contained but enough to draw the attention of half the crew. Her target was the sea deck, the vault. She navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the crew quarters using the schematics she had memorized. The air grew colder, the hum of the engines louder. She found the access panel to the main ventilation shaft that led to the vault. It was secured with a reinforced lock. She used a small, specialized cutting tool to slice through it, working silently, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Inside the shaft, it was dark, dusty, and cramped. She moved with practiced ease, a spider in her own web. The vents led directly into the vault chamber. She reached the final vent cover above the vault. It was secured with heavy-duty bolts. She used a miniature pneumatic drill, its whine muffled by the engine noise and the yacht's thick hull. As the last bolt gave way, she heard voices below. "The device is calibrated, Mr. Cross." A man's voice, scientific and precise. "One pulse and London goes dark for a week." The perfect, untraceable weapon. Alara peered through the opening. The vault was a climate-controlled room lined with lead. In the center, on a raised pedestal, sat a sleek black cylindrical device. The EMP. Damon Cross stood there, flanked by 2 burly guards. Facing him were 2 men in dark suits, the buyers. One of them, older with cold, calculating eyes, looked strikingly familiar. Then it clicked. Alara gasped silently. The older buyer wasn't just familiar. It was Silas Thorne, her handler, the man who had sent her here. He wasn't just Cross's contact, he was his buyer. Silas Thorne was not sending her to stop Cross. He was sending her to steal the device for him after he bought it, likely to resell it at an even higher price or to maintain his own control over the black market. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. He had lied to her. He had risked her life not to save the world but to line his own pockets and advance his own shadowy empire. He was using her to double-cross Damon Cross. And Julian Sterling had been right. Julian had known all along that Silas was after the EMP and that he was a dangerous player. Elara felt a surge of cold fury. She had been a pawn in a game far larger and more cynical than she could have imagined. She had to get the EMP device, not for Silas, not for Julian, but for herself. As leverage, to get out. She had to act now. She reached for the satellite phone Julian had given her. It was time to make a new alliance. And the Judas kiss. Elara lay motionless in the cramped, dust-choked darkness of the ventilation shaft. The metal grating pressed hard against her cheek, smelling of oil and recirculated air. Below her, through the slats, the vault of the obsidian was bathed in the sterile hum of climate control. She watched Silas Thorne, the man who had recruited her, the man she had trusted with her life, shake hands with Damon Cross. The gesture was casual, almost friendly. It was the handshake that sealed her death warrant. "The funds have cleared Silas," Damon said, his voice echoing slightly against the steel walls. $50 million deposited into the Cayman account. The EMP is yours. I trust your buyers in the Middle East are patient. They pay for results, not patience. Silas replied, that dry rattlesnake smile playing on his lips. And speaking of loose ends, what about the girl Ms. Vance? Elara's breath hitched. She pressed her ear closer to the grate. Damon shrugged, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. She served her purpose. She's smart, too smart. She figured out the provenance of the fake Vanitas in 10 minutes. A woman like that is a liability. Agreed, Silas said, cold and detached. I suggest an accident at sea. Once I'm off the ship with the device, of course. I don't want the splashing to ruin my departure. The betrayal didn't bring tears. It brought a freezing clarity. Silas hadn't sent her here to dismantle a criminal empire. He had sent her to audit the goods before he bought them. She was just a quality control inspector who was meant to be discarded in the trash once the job was done. Elara pulled the satellite phone from her pocket. She looked at the message from Julian Sterling hold position. Recovery team inbound. She looked back down at the 2 men who planned to kill her. If she waited for Julian, she was betting on a CIA fixer who had already threatened her. If she stayed here, she was dead. She put the phone away. She was done waiting. She was done being a pawn on their chessboard. It was time to flip the table. She pulled the small EMP jammer from her belt, the one she'd used to scramble the door logs earlier. It was a low-yield tool, but she wasn't trying to be subtle anymore. She stripped the casing, exposing the raw copper wiring, and jammed it directly into the exposed junction box of the ventilation fan. She set the timer 5 seconds. She braced herself against the walls of the shaft. 5, 4, 3. Below, Silas reached for the briefcase containing the device. 2, 1. Lights out. The jammer surged. A spark showered down into the vault, followed by a deafening electrical crack. The lights died instantly. The magnetic locks on the massive steel door slammed home with the sound of a falling guillotine sealing them all inside. The emergency red lighting flickered weakly, casting long, demonic shadows across the room. "What the hell?" Damon shouted. Elara kicked the grate. The heavy metal vent cover plummeted 20 feet, smashing into a glass display case with the sound of a car crash. Before the glass hit the floor, Elara dropped. She landed in a crouch on the center table, rolling instantly to absorb the impact. The room was chaos. "Secure the package!" Silas screamed in the dark. "Shoot anything that moves!" Damon roared. Muzzle flashes lit up the room like a strobe light, disorienting and terrifying. Bullets chipped the marble walls and shredded a priceless 17th century tapestry. Ilara stayed low, crawling on her stomach across the cold floor, the smell of ozone and gunpowder burning her nostrils. She wasn't aiming for the men. She was aiming for the briefcase. She saw it knocked sideways near the pedestal. She lunged her fingers, closing around the cold aluminum handle. A heavy boot stomped down on her wrist. Ilara cried out, twisting her body. One of Damon's guards loomed over her in the red gloom, raising his weapon. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed a shard of the shattered display case glass from the floor and drove it into the gap between his boot and his ankle. He howled, stumbling back. Ilara scrambled up, clutching the heavy briefcase to her chest. "She has it," Silas yelled. "The girl has the device." Ilara sprinted toward the far wall. She knew she couldn't open the magnetic door, the power was dead. But she knew ships. She knew safety protocols. She reached the emergency fire suppression panel. She shattered the protective glass with the corner of the briefcase and yanked the manual lever down with all her weight. Hiss! Halon gas exploded from the ceiling vents. The thick white fog flooded the room instantly, displacing the oxygen to starve a fire and suffocate anyone inside. "Masks, get the masks." Damon choked. Blindness added to the darkness. Ilara pulled the silk of her dress over her nose, her eyes watering. She moved by memory to the mechanical override wheel of the vault door. She grabbed the cold steel wheel and heaved. It screamed in protest, gears grinding against the lockdown mechanism. A bullet sparked off the doorframe inches from her face. She screamed with effort, forcing the wheel to turn. Click. The seal broke. She shoved the heavy door open, stumbling out into the corridor, gasping for sweet oxygen-rich air. She didn't look back at the coughing, shouting men trapped in the white fog. She ran. The Triangle of Death. The ship's alarm was blaring now, a rhythmic shrieking siren. Ilara sprinted toward the stairwell, the briefcase banging against her legs. She had to get to the deck. She had to get to the water. She burst through the door onto the aft deck and slammed straight into a wall of wind and rain. The storm had arrived. The obsidian pitched violently in the heavy swell, the teak deck slick with rain. Thunder cracked overhead, drowning out the sirens. Going somewhere, Ilara. She spun around. Julian Sterling stood by the port railing. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 2 tactical officers in black gear. But they weren't aiming at the vault door. They were aiming at her. "You're late!" Ilara shouted over the wind, backing away. "I'm right on time," Julian said, his voice calm, dangerously steady. "Hand over the football, Ilara. We'll take it from here." "You said you'd extract me." "Plans change," Julian said, stepping closer. "The agency can't have witnesses saying we stole a weapon of mass destruction from a private citizen. It's bad optics. Give me the case and I'll make it quick." He was going to kill her. Just like Silas. Just like Damon. Suddenly the door behind Ilara burst open. Damon Cross stumbled out, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, a submachine gun in his hands. Silas Thorne was right behind him, looking disheveled and feral. "Nobody leaves this ship!" Damon screamed. The standoff was instantaneous. A triangle of death. Julian and his team on the left. Damon and Silas on the right. And Ilara shivering in the rain, trapped in the middle with the most dangerous weapon on earth. "Drop the gun, Damon!" Julian shouted, raising his rifle. "You're on my territory, Fed!" Damon spat back. "Listen to me!" Silas yelled, his eyes fixed on the briefcase in Ilara's hands. "We can make a deal. We split the tech." "No deals!" Damon roared. He raised his gun. Time seemed to slow down. Ilara looked at the dark churning water 40 feet below. She looked at the men who wanted to use her, sell her, or bury her. "You want it!" Ilara screamed, her voice cutting through the storm. She flipped the latches on the briefcase. "Don't you dare!" Julian yelled. Ilara ripped the case open. Inside, the cylindrical EMP core pulsed with a soft blue light. She grabbed the core with one hand and hurled the empty metal briefcase at Damon's feet. "Fetch!" Damon flinched, firing a burst of bullets that went wild. Julian's team opened fire in response. The deck erupted in a chaotic crossfire. Ilara didn't wait to see who won. She turned, clutched the EMP core to her chest, and vaulted over the railing. She fell 40 feet through the darkness. The impact with the Mediterranean was brutal, like hitting concrete. The cold shocked her system, squeezing the air from her lungs. She plunged deep, the water roaring in her ears. She kicked upward, desperate, her lungs burning. She broke the surface, gasping, tossing in the violent waves. She looked up. The obsidian was a silhouette against the lightning. On the deck, the muzzle flashes were still popping. Then a massive boom shook the water. A stray bullet had hit the aviation fuel tanks near the helipad. A fireball the size of a house erupted from the stern of the yacht, turning the night sky orange. The shockwave pushed Ilara under the water again. When she surfaced, the yacht was burning. She was alone in the dark, drifting with the wreckage. She reached into her dress and pulled out her locket. She opened it, bypassing the cyanide pill, and pressed the tiny hidden button. A beacon. 10 minutes later, the hum of a motor cut through the storm. A stealth Zodiac boat materialized out of the gloom. Strong hands reached down and hauled her out of the water. Ilara collapsed onto the rubber floor of the boat, shaking uncontrollably. She looked up to see who had saved her. It was Greta, the severe, marble-faced chief of staff. "You look terrible, Ms. Vance," Greta said in her clipped German accent, handing Ilara a thermal blanket. Ilara let out a hysterical, broken laugh. "You got the transfer. 50 million diverted from Cross's accounts before the system went down," Greta confirmed, steering the boat away from the burning inferno. "The encrypted ledger you uploaded gave me everything I needed to strip him bare." Ilara looked at the EMP core in her lap. "And this? That is up to you," Greta said. Ilara looked at the weapon that could silence a city. She looked at the fire consuming the yacht. She looked at the deep, unforgiving ocean. She didn't want the power. She just wanted the freedom. She leaned over the side of the Zodiac and dropped the device. It sank instantly, spiraling down into the crushing pressure of the deep where no government and no billionaire would ever find it. "Drive," Ilara whispered. "Just drive." The fire on the Obsidian burned for 2 days. The news reports called it a tragic accident caused by an engine malfunction. They reported that billionaire Damon Cross, along with several associates, perished in the blaze. There were rumors of a CIA involvement, rumors of a Russian mob hit, but nothing was ever confirmed. The sea keeps its secrets. As for Ilara Vance, she officially died that night too. Her passport was found in the wreckage. Nathaniel, her ex-husband, received a hefty insurance payout which he promptly lost in a bad investment scheme. 6 months later, an investment scheme secretly orchestrated by a shell company based in the Cayman Islands. Nobody knows where the woman who was Ilara lives now. Some say she bought a vineyard in Tuscany. Others say she runs an art gallery in Kyoto. But if you ever see a woman with striking gray eyes and a cheap silver locket sitting in a cafe watching the world with a calm, predatory precision, don't try to lie to her, and definitely don't ask her about the billionaire's yacht. She packed her bags without tears. She stepped onto the yacht a victim. She swam away a legend. Because the most dangerous woman in the room isn't the one shouting. It's the one who knows exactly when to walk away and what to take with her when she does. What a ride Ilara didn't just survive. She rewrote the game. What would you have done with the EMP device? Sold it for billions? Or dropped it in the ocean like Ilara? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, high-stakes heists, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next real-life drama story. We have a wild one coming up next week about a lottery winner who faked his own kidnapping. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.